Can technology save us? It's a question I want to discuss today. Can technology save the human race? Okay, so let's think about technology for a minute. In its most basic form, technology is a tool. It's a tool that helps us to do something that we couldn't otherwise do without that tool. And let's look at a few examples. Let's look back to the earliest inception of technology. Maybe fire. Fire is a technology. There was a time when humans didn't have fire. And it was a very difficult time in our existence. But once we discovered fire, at least discovered it as it had a purpose. So I would imagine one of the earliest examples would be maybe a bolt of lightning hit a tree, the tree caught fire, we saw something in it, maybe it intrigued us, and we tried to figure out how to use it, what it was. We saw it as magical because it was transformative, that fire would transform a substance from one state to another state. So it could transform a solid into ash, for example. It can transform a raw piece of meat into a cooked piece of meat. It can transform water into steam. We observed these things. And so we began to use fire. First, I think we stole fire. We took it when we saw it. And I think eventually we figured out how to make our own fire. And then other inventions came along. Tools, spears, mostly tools for survival. So technology in its earliest times was survival based. And so we have this idea that technology saves us. It saves the human race by giving us tools that allow us to survive and to live, to keep on living, to live longer lives. But is that true today? Is technology saving us today? And if you think technology is saving us today, what's it saving us from? Are we living any healthier or better? Let's look at the example of GMOs. Genetically modified organisms. GMOs are used in food. The idea behind genetically modified technology, was it meant to help us, to save us, or was it a tool that enabled corporations to make more profits? And there's the difference. So we have a technology which for the longest time that we relied on for survival, keeping us alive, like certain medicines and so forth. But at some point we shifted into a technology that wasn't really meant for us as humans, but rather for corporations. That technologies today aren't helping humans per se to survive, they're helping corporations survive. And corporations and humans are two different things, although we tend to confuse them. So if we think of Google, Apple, Facebook, the big tech companies, car companies, Tesla, Ford, GM, they're constantly developing technology. You look at Elon Musk, he's constantly inventing some new way to make his cars better. He's looking at things like Neuralink, which is a technology which is supposed to tap into our brain. Is that technology helping us as humans? Or is that technology helping the corporation? And if that's the case, if technologies today are not about improving our lives, that is the lives of humans, the human condition, and rather it's helping the corporations, helping them to attain more power and profits and control, then can we really say that technology will eventually save the human race? First of all, does the human race need to be saved? And if you think carefully about it, we put ourselves here by following this little thread of technology and allowing it to conquer our lives because we found it convenient. Then we've put ourselves in a situation where it's no longer helping us. So let's take the example. Let's say the computer. Initially, the computer, when it came out, it was a magical device. You're able to do things in a more efficient way. If you're a graphic designer, if you ran a publishing house, you had to have a computer. If you didn't, you fell behind. It was a competitive thing. Your competitors had one, you had to have one, because if you didn't have one, your competitors would do a better job. They'd get the work done cheaper and faster, and therefore you'd be the competition would drive you out of the market. So the competition kind of kept you there. But even then, at least the computer served the human condition by providing a service or things like a magazine or books to its people, to us, at a much more affordable price. So it made things affordable, more affordable. So technology has this ability to make things more affordable, and that's why it drives competition, because the company that can produce something in a cheaper way can sell more of it, and the companies that charge more, they will be priced out of the market. And it's the same thing with labor. I mean, that's why you see everything going to China, is that the labor's cheap, and there's no regulations, and things could be made a lot cheaper, which means more profits for those that own the corporations that make those things, and la-di-da-di-da-da. And here we are. So computers were okay, but let's think about cell phones, the smart object. I remember when the portable document, was it Palm? Remember Palm, that portable document gizmo? Or the Newton, Apple in the 80s, or was it early 90s? They put out a Newton, which was like a little kind of address book, and you can store files and stuff. It was very, very rudimentary. I remember owning one. I also remember owning a Palm. And then a cell phone. We had the portable document computer combined with a cell phone, which allowed us to get phone calls from people, faster. So, for example, when I was working as a photographer and I had a cell phone, one of the first Motorola phones, I got it because sometimes an editor would want to find a photographer that could do a particular job quickly. So he would call around, and back then you had answering machines or a beeper. So there was always that delay, so back then you'd have to check your answering machine. And if you got a message from an art director, well, you returned a call. But I had a cell phone. And even though I paid a lot for it, if I got that call, I answered it, I got the job immediately. So again, it was a competitive thing. Did it save anybody? Did it save lives? Did it somehow, ensured the safety of the human race to go forward the same way that fire did, the same way that flint tools did when the early hunters had to go out and scavenge for food? No. It was A, convenience, and B, competitive. And it seems like technology over the last 40 years or so have been more about convenience and competition. And the other thing, which I don't really count on too much, it's the gadget factor. Some people love gadgets. They love something new. They don't care what it is. If it's some new kind of gadget, they love it. And so we've been kind of like following this thread of upgrading everything. So now, not only do we have an iPhone or a cell phone, we have to have the latest phone, the one with, the better camera, the one that is faster, that has, more data or faster download speeds. Now there's ones with 5G and, and more connectivity and, and not only that, they've made the old phones obsolete because you can't update them beyond a certain point. The operating systems won't work, and eventually they'll just be a paperweight. So where's this going? Now we have technology which isn't really furthering our existence in the sense of survival. It's mutating us. It's turning us into another form of human. It's merging with us, and we become so dependent on it, so addicted to it, that we cannot, it seems like we can't survive or exist without it. Can you imagine being without a cell phone or a computer today? Not having access to the internet? I mean, it would be nice. It'd be a great experiment if we could all just shut down the internet for a few years and try to go back to what it was. But, I mean, that's not going to happen unless we get hit by an asteroid. But seeing how things are going forward and where technology is being developed, it's being developed in areas that don't really apply to survival. The technology that's being developed today is almost a technology that's serving technology. It's like technology for technology's sake. It's technology to protect technology. So as we move into this brave new world, where we have things like nanotechnology, which interacts with our biology, blockchain systems, cryptocurrencies, where we don't rely on physical money, that technology is building a kind of new world, a matrix, that once we enter into that world, we can't get away from it. We can't unplug. And if we could unplug, we'd be isolated because everyone else is plugged in. You'd have to practically move into the jungles of Brazil. Might not be a bad idea, but I don't know how many of us would survive the jungles of Brazil in the Amazon. You'd probably die in a week of malaria or something. So this technology that we see evolving today is not the technology of yesteryear. It's a new technology. It's a mutant technology that serves itself. It's almost developed its own intelligence, that it's controlling us, that the technology is not our servants, the technology is our masters, and that in being a master, it's forcing us to create better technology that builds on itself, to protect itself, and to make us subservient to it. And I think you can see where this is going if you give it a little bit of thought. you'll understand that, are you really more free by having this device or being connected to all this social media where you can text your friends? Really? I don't think so. You're not free. You're actually more enslaved. Because as more and more people get ensnared with the technology, the iPhones, the Instagrams, the social media, which is another kind of flypaper that we get caught on, we lose ourselves. And you could see it today more than ever with how the governments are becoming more into surveillance and using surveillance. Again, that's another kind of technology to control us. Surveillance by the government is not there to save us. It's not there to prevent crime against us. It's to maintain control of their authority and subjugate us into control. So it seems like today, technology is our master. It's not our servant. And where does that lead? Where does that go? How is that going to look in 50 years, 100 years from now? Are we even going to have ourselves? Are we going to have a physical form? Because the other thing about technology is it tends to disregard things that are useless, things that are inefficient. So as the AI becomes more efficient and the technology becomes more efficient, we become more inefficient. I mean, a great example of this is how many people can actually do math in their heads, that can do simple mathematical computations in their mind anymore. Well, 20, 30 years ago, most people that went to high school or university can do some pretty complex or relatively complex operations in their head. Today, if you did that to somebody, you just get a blank stare. I mean, they're so dependent on their technology. So as technology becomes more sophisticated, we become more useless. And as we become more useless, you have to ask yourself the question, where does that leave us? Where does it leave humans if now humans are useless relative to the technology that they built? And this is a real important question. It's a question that people aren't asking. They're too busy getting high on technology, on the latest and greatest feature, the cool thing, the Neuralink, the cool little, going to Mars, let's go to Mars. It's so cool. Build the technology for it. Once we become useless to the masters of technology, what will happen to us? You need to think long and deep about that, because it will happen. It will happen. There'll come a day that if you're a teacher, you'll lose your job because an AI will take over. Some kind of fancy robot will start teaching what you used to teach, except the robot doesn't take a salary. And you'll be out of a job. The same thing is going to be true for truck drivers, cops. As AI becomes more sophisticated, as this technology becomes incredibly advanced, we become more useless and we will find ourselves out of a job. What will happen then? UBI? So you think the government's going to give us universal basic income forever? And that they're just going to let us breed, have families, generations of humans surviving on universal basic income because AI has taken over everything? Or there'll be just a very small select of elite humans that actually do meaningful work? What happens to the majority of the humans that are basically surplus, useless. They have to be fed. They have to be housed. They have to be entertained. You got to keep them busy. Can't just let them run around. I think these are some very troubling questions. And it's worth thinking about them more deeply and asking yourselves, how do you want to position yourself for what's coming? How do you want to mitigate? It's not going to happen in one generation. It's going to happen over a few generations, but it will happen. But it's happening slowly, and it could happen to you. You could lose your job, as many have, and you'll go on UBI rather, and after a few years, you might get a little, or a feeling of what's my meaning? What am I here for? That you basically have lost meaning in your life. What's that going to be like? So tell me what you think. Think I'm wrong? Think technology is like the greatest thing. Gonna love to get that next iPhone 13 and gonna get that Tesla with the new autopilot. And yeah, this is great. Bring it on. It's just gonna go on forever. Or are you skeptical? And are you feeling like, no, I don't need that. Maybe I can get by on a flip phone. Maybe I don't need that GMO food. Maybe I can grow some food of my own. Or maybe I can buy food from a farmer. Maybe we need to rethink technology. That it's not necessarily a convenience or helpful, but rather it's a snare. It's a Trojan horse that leads us astray from ourselves and eventually imprisons us in its own maze, in its own structure, and we become subservient to it. And once that happens, we are expendable. Let me know what you think. Take care.